We can always post it there later, I think.
Okay, I won't do that then.
Right. I obviously agree. And it's all about freedom. So, as Margot said, uh, whatever, however someone would want to do this should be fine, right? And why is anyone looking to the government or a medicalized board of either medicine or midwifery? I mean, it's rarely midwifery, but it can be in some states, but still, why is anyone looking to them for guidance? And of course, we know there are many answers to that. But why? Like at what point, just did midwives decide that that was their best option, to allow a group of people who don't understand anything about the way birth works, usually nothing about like the emotional process of birth, the spiritual process of birth, to make these false guidelines? And having worked under them myself for at least a couple of years as a licensed midwife, I can attest to the fact that it is very restrictive, and that's obvious, but also in feeling. You always are looking out for yourself in a sense. You're not really able to focus on like, okay, but what does this mom need? Like if someone's waters are open for too long, it's not really her choice to make. That's the way it's construed. So a woman could do whatever she wants, of course, but if she wants to keep her license, if the midwife wants to keep her license, then she will make her recommendations based on what's written in these rules and not on the woman that's in front of her. So if we cared about freedom or autonomy or sovereignty, then this would really be the wrong way to go in every possible manner. It is very much the wrong way to go to inspire people to take responsibility for themselves, because that is not that paradigm. The paradigm is the midwife is in charge. She has the set of rules. She will keep things safe. And it completely throws off the balance, of power, so to speak. And the woman is just kind of like this infantile person that couldn't possibly know what's best for her. So it is an issue that has its tentacles in a lot of different like subtopics. But we love them. We love all the subtopics.
Yeah, I'm curious, of the almost 60 people who are here, I'm curious if anyone out there is considering becoming a midwife, and this licensing and government regulation thing is feeling like the only obstacle or the only reason that you're not moving forward and doing it, becoming a midwife. If you want to pop it in the chat, I'd be curious if that's anyone here. Looks like Kristen and Julia. Cool. It's your dream to become a midwife, but I will not be pursuing licensure. It wasn't until I found indie birth. Lovely. Yeah, we hear this a lot, that this is sort of like the stumbling block for a lot of people. Guess I wanted to see over here.
Right. Literally every day. I mean, multiple emails come our way from women all over the world, and many of them don't even like have the door cracked open yet to it being a possibility. And those of you that know us, we love possibilities. That's our favorite thing to talk about, is how to make new things possible and what aren't we thinking of. So it is again shocking to realize that most women out there, smart, educated women, just think that they have to do it this way, and they have to get a license or have a medicalized apprenticeship or both.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily have like a magic wand to help absolve you of these fears overnight or concerns that are in many cases really legitimate. But I think what my hope is, I was thinking about this all morning, was to just sort of invite you to imagine what you would do if this wasn't a concern. Like if the fear of persecution was not there, like what would that look like, and really dream into that and feel into that. Because even if you don't immediately take the next step forward, I think just letting yourself imagine what that could be like is really powerful. And when I was driving home from the gym this morning, honestly, I can't even remember like the full plot of the movie, but that movie V for Vendetta like popped into my head. And it's just like, there's so much power in numbers, and in like, if every single woman in a community has this information, or even a third of them, and we're all just helping each other, it would be impossible for them to be enforcing all of these ridiculous things on us. It's like when there's only one person within 200 miles that it's much easier to get picked on and picked out. And so I just wanted to put that out there too, that there's a snowball effect, I think. And I've seen that here locally where I live. I feel like you've seen it where you are, Marin. Like when there's one person who's brave enough to do it this way, then other people start to notice, and then they start to feel brave enough, and it ultimately ends up really changing quickly if we let it.
We could do a quick little exercise.
Yes, please.
I think it would be fun to just each try to feel what you just shared, what you recommended. Maybe first, how about we focus on this really constrictive version of midwifery, whatever you want to call it, right? Where you're imagining yourself having to answer to people that you don't want to answer to, that you don't respect. Just kind of build up the scenario like in your head for a minute. Like, what would it feel like to be a midwife working like that? And that doesn't apply to everyone. It might not apply to you here even. Like some people are going to be okay with that and they're going to feel safe in that. So I guess you kind of have to fit the mold I'm setting here, but kind of feel into that constriction. Having to fill out papers, telling clients that they need to go to the hospital now because they've been pushing for too long. Turning women away when they have a breech baby or twins. So just find that place in your body where you actually can feel that. And like I said, maybe it doesn't feel constrictive to you. So you just work with what you've got, what you feel. And just notice where you feel it in your body. And just witness it. There's nothing to really do. Maybe other ideas or thoughts come in. Maybe you kind of have images, or maybe you remember something. It's just letting your body tell you what it thinks about that, because we could let our brains tell us what we think about a thing, but what does our body actually think about that? How would we feel if that was our life? And you can always do this again later when you have some more time to feel into it and just be present by yourself. And now just taking the contrast, whatever that is for you, with this idea of working outside the system. And again, maybe for some people that's really bringing up a lot of fear and a lot of constriction, and that's not wrong at all. So this idea of being outside of the system, of not having that box to be in, of not having those rules to follow. And just noticing that feeling, where in your body do you feel that? And just how is it different? How is it different than the first scenario? How would you describe it? What sensations are there? And just letting your body tell you where you're at with that scenario. It's so easy to let our brains, tell us what's wrong or right, even in this context of this conversation, because Margot and I have what we think. So just kind of make note, with being witness to whatever there was there for you. If anybody wants to share anything in the chat, they can, but you also can, like I said, come back to this later and just be with the sensations. I think that's the key in so many ways when we find ourselves looking outside for the world to be okay for us. And licensing is like the best example of that. Is like, if we just had this, if midwifery was just free where I live, like I would be different. And the truth is you wouldn't be different, right? So the goal is to like access that inside of ourselves to the best ability that we can and find the answer for us. So yeah, if anybody wants to share how that went for them or anything, I'm reading. Yeah, I love these responses, all of them. Mabel, Evie or Evie. Yeah, so again, use that, take time with that and come back to that. You will not be led astray by your own body. I wish I had listened to that. I know when I was licensed initially as a midwife, I knew it was not the right thing for me. I knew in my head it was not the right thing. I probably knew in my body, but I wasn't feeling at that point. So, I wouldn't say it was a mistake getting a license either, but I would have been more true to myself had I been able to listen earlier. So, always in sharing our own experiences, right? You kind of not hope you're going to change someone else's, but yeah, I don't think you all need to go through the same thing. You can shortcut, skip the license if that's what resonates with you.
Shortcut. Yeah, and I think that's important what you said too, just that, yeah, it's easy to think that if licensure were not a thing and you lived in a state like mine, for example, like Minnesota, where licensure is voluntary, that all of a sudden you would magically be different. But I can tell you from my own experience, like when I first started going to births, the very first birth I went to here and attended as a midwife, was as a backup. So I wasn't expecting to even get called. It's like a long, funny story, but on the way there, it was definitely like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? This is crazy. It brought up all of the same stuff. Even though I was in a state where I knew I wouldn't legally get in trouble, by the letter of the law or whatever. At least that was my understanding. So even having that piece, there was still an inner anxiety and a story probably from many generations of, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm not allowed to do this. This isn't right. Someone's going to notice, someone's going to see me, right? And someone's going to punish me because I'm doing this. And so I think the more you can work with that, and it might be all at once a shift, but in my experience, it was more like baby steps, like over time, just growing into being comfortable with doing what I do. And I've said this other places too. Now I don't feel any sort of way necessarily about attending a birth anywhere, regardless of what the laws there say, because I feel like I've just had the bodily experience of attending births, and I know I'm a midwife, and it somehow has become unlinked from this like permission piece. But I wouldn't say it was easier overnight that happened. for me. And so just know that that's okay too. If you're like, I don't know if I'll ever get there.
It's a journey. I wouldn't say that I never have moments of having to work through those things. And of
Mhm.
course, I've been in a state for the last 10 years where licensing is considered mandatory, and I've done it anyway. But yeah, that doesn't mean you don't have things you have to work through. But that's what I've chosen. I'd rather work through the things and be in my integrity than hide behind something that doesn't feel right for me. And like I said, I feel like I'm wiser now, and I understand that the fears we have to be who we are, they remain whether or not we have a license or not, right? Like you're talking about
Mhm.
ancestry and, um, our own great 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 grandmothers being healers that maybe were burned or witches or whatever, so it is in us to already feel like we're doing something wrong for a lot of women, even when they have that piece of paper. And I think that's what still needs to be looked at. And, honestly, if there were some perfect world where everybody was willing to look at that, then women as a whole would rise up and just say, like, fuck the license. But as it stands, there's still too many in fear. And that's not a judgment. I think it's just feels like an observation to me, that a lot of midwifery as we know it is built on fear.
Yeah, if people aren't familiar with a group on Facebook, I'm not sure if you have to, I don't, there's no way to prove you're a midwife. Like, anyways, there's a group on Facebook called Midwives Anonymous. And I'm in it. And sometimes there are interesting things. Mostly I'm there to share indie birth links and give my perspective. But it's similar to the reel that Sam sent me this week, where like, wow, it is so insightful into what is actually happening and the thinking, like the psychology behind why midwives are doing what they're doing and how they justify what they're doing. And again, like I'm not here to be like the good bad police, but it is a striking difference to see people talking about. Most recently there was a thread about, I think it was from a brand new midwife who said she'd never had to risk anyone out at 42 weeks, and she had someone who was 41 and 6 or something, and she was trying to figure out what to do, and she felt so horrible. She didn't want to tell this woman she couldn't, birth at home, and didn't want to send her to the hospital. And it was just like all of these midwives being like, it's just what we have to do. It's like we gotta give up the one for the many. And like, I'm sure she'll have a great hospital birth, and here's all the ways she can have a maybe better one. And it was just so interesting because I know that that's the dialogue. I've heard it, 10 years ago when I was maybe more in those kind of groups as a student. But to see that it's still there, and and even midwives that I've met and known and maybe act like they are so for women and for autonomy, but then turning around and saying the same stuff in a group of midwives is really fascinating. So I think that speaks to what you said, Lee. Just feels lonely since other midwives are practicing in a totally different model. That's where we come in, though. We have, so many students all around the country and students in other countries. And we have regular meetings like this, but then also in our school program, we meet weekly and students have cohorts. And so that's a huge part of our mission is helping people not feel so lonely, because again, there's power in numbers, and there's power in validating each other's experiences and seeing that, yeah, we're not alone and we're not weird. And well, I mean, maybe we're weird, but in a good way, right?
I don't feel that piece anymore. Not that I didn't at one point, but that piece about
Being
feeling lonely. Yeah, and no judgment on that. I'm just saying that mainstream midwifery just doesn't have any relevance in my life. It's not anything I would choose as a woman. It's just not relevant to me. And I understand it's still a choice. And I think that's great for women that want it. But in other words, those midwives working in that way, I don't think we have a language that we could both understand. And so it doesn't feel lonely, because what is that? You know, it would just be stressful, or it would be, I don't know, maybe just a lot of judgment. I mean, I don't know. There are people, of course, that don't understand that. And I think if you haven't been in the birth world long, it's easy to be like, why can't we all get along? And I don't feel animosity. I just don't have any interest in association.
I'm trying to catch up in the reading over here in the chat. People have questions, feel free to post them.
I will give a little plug for my in-person retreat in Hawaii in a couple of months, mostly because this is a huge part of the conversation that we work through together, with journaling exercises and meditations, and kind of getting to the bottom of it for some of you, you know, like, where did this come from that you needed someone's permission, and where else in your life are you looking for someone else to tell you? I mean, there's a lot we go into during that weekend. So maybe Sam or Angelia, could you guys post the link to that? It's coming up in October, and like I said, it's in person, so we get to do this times 2 days. Yes, Caitlin, of course. I love you. I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, we are all so powerful. And I do think you're right with that piece around like feeling like we need someone. I mean, there is the opposite of that, I guess, where we never feel like we need anyone, and, you know, we're just kind of loners. And then there's knowing that you have what you need inside of you, and not really needing, you know, too much on the outside. I don't know if I get backlash because I don't pay attention. Honestly, no idea. It's not really a community if you think about it. If people are behaving the way they are, it's not a community I want to be a part of. So, not to say that maybe in some strange universe, well, and I do have friends that are licensed midwives, not here, but I have friends that are licensed midwives in CNM. So actually, that's not strange at all. We're friends. And, you know, we don't go into the nitty gritty of what we've each chosen, because we each know what we've chosen, and we both, you know, feel good about why we've chosen what we've chosen. So I think that's totally possible. But as far as like backup in a location from other practitioners or providers that are licensed, you know, it certainly can be possible. And there are people here that I was working with that were in the system. So never say never. You know, I don't have a like, I hate you sign out. I just have to do what I do, and people should do what they do. And I don't have time to pay attention to what that really is.
Yeah, and I think this is where that imagination piece really comes in, and really being open to what can be possible. And also speaks to what I had mentioned earlier about just like the snowball effect. You know, I have let's see, it's like hard to say exactly, at least 2 backups here where I live. One was my apprentice, who is now an unlicensed midwife about an hour away. And then the other one is someone who is licensed and she's taught a couple classes for our school, for our indie birth midwifery school. She was unlicensed for a while and then got her license. I can't remember what her reasoning was. I think it was to get like easier access to ultrasounds and stuff for people, which like I don't care about. So, you know, we still have a great relationship, and I see her all the time. And we've been trying to do like every 6 weeks a get together with a number of different birth workers and midwives in the area. So I went from having no one when I moved here. It was like really weird. No one would even like meet with me and have tea, to having, it feels like a very supportive community of other midwives and students. And, there's even like a retired midwife who's a friend, and all kinds of options. I have a labor and delivery nurse friend who's always been like, if you need someone in a pinch, call me. So like, I feel like I have tons of support here. And I've only lived here, since 2016, which now is like feeling like a long time actually. But, that community came together pretty quickly once I just was clear about who I was and what I was doing. And I feel like I need to tally it up at some point, Maren. It's so many, because there's more people that I haven't even met here who have taken our doula course now. I want to say there's like 15 to 20 people who have taken our doula training in my area. And I don't live in a big city. I live in a like 100,000 person city. So there's like all kinds of indie birth goodness going on in my little pocket of Minnesota. And not just because I'm here, but because, if anybody was doing this work in a way that was really like, I was gonna say like out and proud about it, like that attracts people, and people are intrigued and interested in, all the things. So.
Right. And same here. I mean, I've only been here 2 years and it's a similar thing. So I think that's just an overall vote to kind of make your own community, and with the women you're serving, even as a doula, that's, I think, feels more true to me anyways. Like the women that you've served being where that community starts and where that grows from. And, because birth workers come and go, truthfully, anyways.
Totally. Right. It's like you have to like plant yourself, kind of is the word that keeps coming to mind for me. Plant yourself as the little seed.
Yeah, and you have to be willing to just be who you are. So if you're following this path of whatever, radical midwifery, autonomous birth, then you have to be willing to speak about it. You have to be willing to teach about it. There's no use hiding in your house, feeling like an outcast, because you're not. The community, wherever you are, I can guarantee you, needs what you have, even if it's right now just teaching. So I say that for the women that are maybe on this midwifery path and feeling all these things and so much to work out. Yes, you'll get to the point where maybe you have to make some choices about those things. But in the meantime, just shining your light in the world, in your community. And then, you are welcomed in a sense already, because women want this. They want to have beautiful, amazing births without people touching them all over. Like, we know that that's true. That's what we've been doing for the last decade and a half of our lives. So I know anywhere I went in the world that there would be women that want this, and that gives me confidence. And I know that that's true for all of us.
Yeah, Kristen said my area has been flooded with 4 midwives, all licensed minded. In the last few years, I find myself doubting there is space for me. So this resonates. And I would argue that there's probably even more space for you now, because like Maren was saying, like women want this. And, when we teach our free workshop, there's often so many people there, like 20 to 30 women. And there's never anyone in the room that says they don't want this. Not all of them choose home birth, and not all of them hire me, because I think there's a lot of layers that they have maybe not examined. But pretty much every woman that I come across out in the world, and I know this isn't true of like 100% of them, but pretty much all of them say some version of like, I want to have a natural birth. Like this is what I want. And if you show them what is possible, they're usually really excited. I think a lot of them get in their own way and start feeling like maybe it's not something that they can do, or that, is available to them for some reason or another, but they want it. And so in having those midwives there, I think ultimately that's a great thing, because I think a lot of women will see that as an option, learn about that, and then you'll be there when they're ready to take it to like the next level. So yeah, it's not, I don't think that's a bad situation to find yourself in where you're like all of a sudden not going to have women who want you. It's probably going to actually create more interest in what you're offering, especially once a number of them have experienced all the not ideal things that can happen when they work with a licensed midwife, like getting risked out for all sorts of silly reasons. So people are asking what kind of workshops we recommend. We give our Doula Academy students and our Indie Birth Midwifery School students access to basically our swipe files so they can just take our workshops and do them in their communities. So if that's something you're interested in, both of those are really great options. But basically, you know, just teaching people about how birth works and showing them lots of videos. What else, Maren?
I know we say this every time with this topic, but we never know who's new here. So I'll say it again, that women not only want this, but they don't generally care at all about licenses and certification once they are educated. So I'm not saying right off the bat, in fact, I don't know if you saw that post on Instagram, Margot, where it was about finding someone in Minnesota that was certified, and someone said, contact Margot from Indie Birth. And I couldn't help myself. I had to comment and say, like, yeah, definitely. But like, why only look for certified people? Like, that's just in the reflex
Yep.
of the mainstream culture. Like, you're going to build a house, you want a certified contractor. You want a midwife, you want a certified midwife. So how can we work with that? Because that's not true. And all you have to do if you're new and curious is read a little bit about the history of licensing, midwifery licensing in particular, or any kind of licensing. It's fascinating. It's fascinating because we are brought up in this world thinking that that's better, that those people are smarter and more skilled. And that's not necessarily true. So these are the things we talk about at our free workshop. And it's not like a plug to hire me. I don't really care. But I want the community to understand how this works, because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. People don't understand. And especially with midwifery, they think it means something, and it doesn't. The other side of that discussion is, what generally comes up, which is, well, if someone isn't licensed, how do you know they know anything? How do you know, they're not crazy? Same thing. There's a lot of education there. There's word of mouth. Like, how did people ever function before licensing, right? It is a pretty new concept. So again, in addition to showing how birth looks, how it works, there is this discussion of options. And if your community doesn't have a midwife that works free of this stuff, I hate saying unlicensed some days, because that's not the standard in my mind. Licensing is not a standard that I want to shoot for, and I just happen to not have one. It's on purpose. So I say, I work freely where I live. But having women understand options. So I say at the workshop, how would you feel if your licensed midwife dropped your care at 42 weeks? And people in the room are like, what does that mean? Why would that happen? How would you feel if your midwife makes you go to the hospital because you've been pushing too long? People have no idea what they're signing up for. So even if you're not a midwife, even if you're not, anybody that's actually attending births, there's no reason you can't talk about the way this actually works. People don't know. As a licensed midwife myself, many years ago, I didn't even know the fine print of what I was signing up for. So I can guarantee you that the average pregnant woman out there just doesn't know. She does not know what her options are or how they differ.
And then on the flip side, yeah, Kaishla, I hope I'm saying that right. There's a crazy in every group, LOL, licensed or unlicensed. Yeah, I was gonna say on the flip side, oh my gosh, I lost it. Where'd it go? Where'd my brain thought go?
The flip side of what?
As unlicensed or license free providers, people, whatever we want, midwives, birth keepers, there's all these words out there. We also, I think, need to hold each other up to a standard of being really transparent so that our clients do know what they're signing up for. And so that's what we teach our students. You know, I give people like an 8-page long explanation of my services with my expectations of them, their expectations of me. It's very clear, or it should be. And like, I'm even getting more obsessive about that when people sign on with me. I want them to initial every single line of it, because like people need to know what they're signing up for, whether you have a license or whether you don't. And so I think that's a standard that I think is really important. And, you know, one of those places where, you know, if there's someone who's asking me for a recommendation in, you know, Timbuktu, and I know there's maybe an unlicensed person there, but I don't know anything about them, I'll often say like, yeah, like that person I think is a midwife. I don't know anything about their training. Like, I am not going to vouch for someone that I don't personally know. And like, you should ask them questions. You shouldn't just be like, oh my gosh, cool, a rebel midwife, like sign me up. Because like, there's also this really wacky movement of people claiming that title who really don't know what they're doing. So if that's what you want, that's great. If you're all clear on everybody's level of education and training and what they're willing to do or not at a birth, that's totally fine. But when people are not being transparent on the other side, is also problematic, you know?
Definitely. That's a moon circle for another day.
For another day.
So if you're curious about what the midwives in your state answer to, if there is licensing available, I would just Google it, you know, like Arizona licensed midwives rules and regulations. It's a shocking thing once you find them, and you might have to dig a little. It's not always readily available. And usually, I mean, the Arizona one is probably 16 to 20 pages of what they can and cannot do. And isn't that shocking? Like, isn't it shocking that people don't know? I mean, I was one of those people that didn't know. Yeah.
We hear this a lot. What Mabel shared over here too, the difficult part for me is that after you share about this and you can see the wheels turning for women and they ask, so what can I do? Who can I work with? And there's no one I can recommend. And, you know, that's again where it's like, it might need to be you, you know? You might have to become the person, because we hear that all the time. There's a shortage of doulas, and there's also a way more major shortage of midwives. And there's a huge shortage of midwives like us. So, you know, it's the truth.
And while that's true, and I hope it will be you one day, Mabel, I'm sure it will be, I think we need to detach from the outcome, in a sense, of what we think sharing that information means. So if it's in your integrity to share that, you share that. You don't have to have a solution.
Right.
You don't have to. And women are creative and smart. And, you know, beautiful Caitlin on this call, thank you for your sweet comment, like drove her family here to Kentucky to have her baby here when it wasn't possible where she lives. So don't doubt the creativity of a determined woman, and don't hold back on the transparent facts, because that's treating women just like the medicalized system treats them. We think they can't handle it. We think they, you know, and I mean, I get it. At the same time, it's like, but the next question is, where can I go to have that birth? So it's really humbling to be like, I don't know. I mean, if enough people here in New York want that, like, I'm sure something will show up. Someone will show up.
Or maybe it'll be one of those women who are at the class who are like, that's bullshit. Like, I'm going to do this then, even if it's 5 years from then. Like, yeah, I think it's really important that we don't, like you're saying, sort of censor ourselves because we think it will make them more comfortable. Yeah, it's better to like let them know and and then have the awareness of it, even if that's hard in the moment.
Because most women don't need us anyway, and I will stand by that. So by teaching them this, we're not teaching them they have to hire a midwife either. I don't care what people do. And a midwife is great. I'm the first to say that as well. I think we are very valuable. And there's a lot of knowledge and experience we can pass on, and all of the great things that we all believe about midwives. But if a woman's determined enough, she can just have her baby. She doesn't need anyone.
Any last questions? Should I pop some links in the chat, Maren?
And the women that do that, whether that's they go to another state to find a midwife or they just have their babies themselves, I feel like those are also very likely candidates for becoming midwives, honestly. It's women that couldn't find someone often that really carry the torch for what we're talking about because they were in that situation. And maybe many of you have been. So, and that's why you're here. I don't know if Margot or Sam or Angelia, any of you guys have links to post. I meant to make a list and I totally forgot.
I do.
So we'll post some links here for those of you that are new. If you
Could
are
say,
new, yeah,
could you say
we
a little bit about the beginner's guide?
Oh, sure. So Margot will post some links, podcasts probably, or podcast archives, and all kinds of ways to get involved with the indie birth community. For this talk today, the beginner's guide to radical midwifery would be a great place to start. That is a course we developed that is kind of a precursor to the indie birth midwifery school. And that's not saying you have to go on to the school, but we made the course for covering topics like this because an hour is great, but really not enough if you're someone that is really looking to dig into, like I said, the history of licensing, more of that before you can more firmly decide that you want to walk this path. So I would check out that. And the other links to the school are there. The student midwife primer. I think that's about it. The social maybe is a great link to post. I'm also going to post the link to my Mama's Circle, which starts next week. That's not birth related per se, but if there are mamas here that want to check that out, I'd love to have you. And yeah, we'll see how that unfolds.
One second. Sweet.
Awesome.
Were there any last questions?
No, just like lots of comments. Last but not least, we do have a donation link. We've been doing these meetings free for a long time, as well as like endless hours of free content and podcasts. So no need to donate. This is a free meeting. But if you really feel like you got something out of this, we'd love that, just because a lot of the work we put out into the world is by donation. So do you have that, or do you want me to find it?
I have like that really long one you sent me.
Really long one.
But I don't know.
Yeah, that's, I mean, we can make it nicer next time, but that's what I got.
Do you have it?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, and if you want to share the moon circles with people, that would be totally awesome. We're only doing them once a month now. So people can sign up, they'll get the text reminder that seemed to work well this time. And we'll see you next month.
you know the topic next month?
I do not.
Okay, it'll be good.
Yeah, and I'll see you. Or no, I actually might not be on the next one, but you will.
Awesome.
All right. Bye, everybody. Happy full moon. Thanks for coming.